30 days. That is exactly how long my phone had been silent since I walked out of that lawyer's office. No check-ins, no apologies, just a vacuum where a family used to be. Then, at 11:51 p.m., the screen lit up in the dark. It wasn't an olive branch. It was an invoice. A text from my mother, Monica. Mortgage is due. Transfer the money. She hadn't even realized I'd resigned. She just noticed the automatic deposit didn't hit. I stared at the glowing text. My pulse didn't even spike. I treated the message like an incorrect prescription, dangerous if filled, harmless if rejected. I typed my reply with the cold precision of a pharmacist refusing a narcotic refill. Forward the bill to the owner. That isn't me. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. To understand why 3 words destroyed my family, you have to understand the economics of the Miller household. It wasn't built on love or loyalty. It was built on a very specific, unspoken currency. My capability. For the last 4 years, I have been the silent equity partner in my parents' retirement dream. They live in a sprawling 4-bedroom house in the Denver suburbs, the kind with a wraparound porch and a clear, $1 million view of the Rockies. It is their forever home. But the view didn't belong to them. It belonged to the bank, and the monthly premium belonged to me. 4 years ago, my father, Timothy, made a series of disastrous investments. He bet his pension on a friend's tech startup that evaporated overnight. They were facing foreclosure. I was 29, a senior pharmacist, just starting to see real money after years of student loans. I didn't hesitate. I stepped in. $1,500 a month. That was the price to keep the roof over their heads. I set up the automatic transfer, and they went back to their view. Meanwhile, I lived in a basement apartment 30 minutes away. My view was a retaining wall and the tires of the cars parked on the street above. I drove a 10-year-old sedan. I packed my lunch every day. I lived like a college student so my parents could live like retirees. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was duty. Then there was Zachary. My younger brother is 31 years old, but in our family's ledger, he is perpetually 12. Zachary is a dreamer. That is the family euphemism for unemployable. He has entrepreneurial spirit, which really just means he has a gambling addiction and a series of LLCs that never turn a profit. While I was clocking 60-hour weeks at the pharmacy, double-checking interactions and managing inventory, Zachary was pitching disruptive apps to investors who politely showed him the door. And yet, whenever Zachary fell, my parents were there with a safety net woven from my money. When he totaled his car, Dad found the cash for a new one. When his landlord threatened eviction, Mom scraped together the rent. I watched this dynamic for years, baffled by the math of it. Why did the child who contributed nothing get everything, while the child who kept the lights on got ignored? It took me a long time to diagnose the pathology. It wasn't just favoritism, it was the curse of capability. My parents didn't neglect me because they didn't love me. They neglected me because I was competent. In their minds, my stability was a given. I was the structural integrity of the family, boring, load-bearing, and invisible. Because I could handle the burden, they decided I should, transforming my strength into a liability. My success wasn't an asset to be celebrated. It was a resource to be extracted. Zachary, on the other hand, was fragile. His incompetence was his currency. It bought him attention. It bought him forgiveness. It bought him a house he didn't pay for. They punished me for my success and rewarded him for his failure. I had become the bank, and Zachary was the bad asset they refused to write off. I just didn't realize that they were planning to liquidate me completely until the day we walked into that lawyer's office. The air conditioning in the lawyer's office was set to a temperature I could only describe as aggressive. It smelled of lemon polish and old dust, the kind of sterile environment where life-altering news is delivered with a smile. I sat in a high-backed leather chair, smoothing the skirt of my work dress. I had come straight from a 12-hour shift. My feet throbbed. Timothy and Monica sat opposite me. They were holding hands. It was a performance of unity I recognized from every parent-teacher conference where they had to explain why Zachary hadn't turned in his homework. Zachary was sprawled in the chair next to them, scrolling on his phone, looking bored. He wasn't nervous. That should have been my first warning. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, cleared his throat. He was a small man who seemed to shrink under the weight of the document on his desk. "As you know," he began, "your parents wanted to update their living trust given Zachary's recent engagement." I nodded. It made sense. Zachary was marrying a girl he'd met 2 months ago in Vegas. She was pregnant. He needed to grow up. I assumed this meeting was about setting up a trust fund for the baby, or maybe formalizing some of the loans they'd given him. The primary residence, Mr. Henderson continued, his eyes not meeting mine, located at 42 Evergreen Terrace, along with the investment portfolio and the vintage watch collection, will be transferred to the sole ownership of Zachary Miller upon the passing of Timothy and Monica. The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioner and the blood rushing in my ears. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice sounding thin and reedy. "Could you repeat that?" "The house and the primary assets are left to Zachary," Mr. Henderson said, faster this time. I looked at my parents. My mother was studying her cuticles. My father was looking out the window. "And Caitlin?" I asked. "What is left to Caitlin?" Mr. Henderson flipped a page. "To Caitlin, they leave the grandmother's pearl necklace and a legacy of love." A legacy of love. And a string of pearls worth maybe $300 on eBay. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my voice was steady. "I pay the mortgage on that house," I said. "I have paid every single dime of the mortgage for 4 years. The down payment on the refinance, that was me. The new roof last summer, me." My father finally turned to look at me. His face was hard, the face of a man who had convinced himself he was doing the right thing. "Zachary has a family now. Caitlin," he said. "He needs stability. He needs a head start." "And I don't?" I asked. "You're strong, Katie," he said, using the nickname I hadn't heard since I was 10. "You're a professional. You have a career. You're strong enough to buy your own house. Zachary isn't." There it was. The sentence that severed the artery. "You're strong enough." My competence was the weapon they used to disinherit me. I looked at Zachary. He finally looked up from his phone. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look guilty. He looked smug. He knew. He had known the whole time. He had let me pay for his inheritance. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. The shock acted like a localized anesthetic. I felt the pressure of the betrayal, the immense weight of it, but the pain hadn't registered yet. They had looked at me, calculated my worth, and decided it was 0. Actually, less than 0. I was a resource to be used until I was empty, and then discarded so the real child could thrive. "I see," I said. I picked up my purse. "I think we're done here." "Caitlin, don't be dramatic," my mother said, her voice sharp. "It's just paper. We're still a family." "No," I said, walking to the door. "We're not." I walked out of that office and into the blinding afternoon sun. I got into my 10-year-old sedan, the one with the check engine light that had been on for 6 months because I couldn't afford to fix it, and I drove home. The betrayal settled in my gut, heavy and cold. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the lie. They had let me believe I was a partner, a savior, but I was just the help. I drove home in silence. No radio, no podcasts, just the sound of tires on pavement and the steady, rhythmic thrum of my own heart slowing down. When I unlocked the door to my basement apartment, the air was stale, smelling of trapped heat and solitude. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat at my small kitchen table, the one I'd bought secondhand for $50, and opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life, a harsh blue square in the dim room. I logged into my banking portal. My fingers moved automatically, typing the password I had memorized 4 years ago, the day I signed my life away to save theirs. The dashboard loaded, and there it was, the pending transaction, scheduled for the 1st of the month, just 3 days away. Transfer, $1,500. Recipient, Timothy and Monica Miller joint checking. My finger hovered over the trackpad. For 4 years, I had told myself that this money was a safety net. I told myself I was the good daughter, the one who stepped up when the world knocked her parents down. But looking at that number on the screen, the illusion shattered. I hadn't been building a safety net. I had been forging a chain. In that moment, an invisible ledger opened in my mind. It wasn't just about the $50,000 I'd transferred over the years. It was the emotional compound interest I had been paying every single day. I saw the entries clearly, written in red ink. Item: the time I missed my own friend's wedding to drive Dad to a physical therapy appointment because Zachary was too hungover. Cost: my social life. Item: the Christmas I ate peanut butter toast for dinner so I could afford the premium heating oil they insisted on. Cost: my dignity. Item: the hundreds of times I swallowed my pride when Mom praised Zachary's big ideas while ignoring my steady paycheck. Cost: my self-worth. I had spent my entire adult life trying to buy my way into my own family. I thought if I paid enough, if I was useful enough, if I was strong enough, eventually the balance would shift. Eventually, I would be worth something to them. But the will reading had proved that the return on investment was zero. Actually, it was negative. I wasn't buying their love. I was financing my own enslavement. I was paying a monthly subscription fee to be treated like a stranger in my own life. The realization washed over me, cold and clarifying. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. This wasn't a family dynamic. It was a bad contract. And any good business person knows when to cut their losses. I moved the cursor. I clicked on the transaction. A menu popped up with options: edit amount, change date, cancel series. I didn't hesitate. I selected cancel series. A confirmation box appeared. Are you sure you want to cancel all future recurring payments to Timothy and Monica Miller? Yes, I whispered to the empty room. I am sure. I clicked confirm. The screen refreshed. The pending transfer vanished. The line item was gone. Just like that, 4 years of obligation evaporated into digital mist. I closed the laptop. The room was dark, but for the first time in forever, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I stood up, walked to the fridge, and poured myself a glass of water. It tasted like freedom. The leaves outside my basement window turned from green to gold, but my phone remained a black mirror. I didn't block their numbers. I didn't change my email address. I wanted to conduct one final experiment. I wanted to see if Timothy and Monica Miller were capable of calling their daughter just to ask how she was doing, without a transaction attached. Day 1 passed. Day 5. Day 14. The silence in my apartment wasn't empty. It was data. It was the final proof I needed to close the case on my own guilt. If I had been a daughter to them, they would have noticed my absence. But I wasn't a daughter. I was a utility. I was the electricity company or the internet service provider. You don't call the power company to ask about their day. You only call them when the lights go out. I went to work. I filled prescriptions. I came home. I watched the calendar pages turn, counting down to the first of the month. I felt a strange calmness settling over me, the kind of clarity you get when a fever finally breaks. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. I was waiting for the bounce. Then came the night of November 1st, 11:51 p.m. My phone lit up on the nightstand. It wasn't a call. It was a text from Monica. Mortgage is due. Transfer the money. No, hello. No, are you okay? Just a demand for payment, as if I were a tenant who was late on rent. She hadn't even realized I'd resigned. She just noticed the service had been interrupted. I picked up the phone. I typed the words I had been rehearsing in my head for 30 days. Forward the bill to the owner. That isn't me. I hit send. I set the phone down and waited. It took exactly 14 seconds for the explosion to begin. My phone started buzzing against the wood of the nightstand. A harsh, vibrating drill. Monica was calling. I let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately. Then a text from Zachary. What the fuck? Mom is freaking out. I didn't answer. I watched the notifications stack up on the lock screen like overdue notices. Monica. Voicemail. Caitlin, pick up. The bank sent a notification. If we don't pay by the 5th, there's a late fee. What are you playing at? You know Zachary doesn't have access to the funds yet. Zachary, text. You can't just cut us off. That house is my future. You're trying to ruin me because you're jealous. Monica, text. Your father is stressing out. His blood pressure is up. Do you want to put him back in the hospital? Send the money tonight. I read the messages with the detachment of a forensic accountant reviewing a bankrupt ledger. There was no concern for me. There was no curiosity about why I had stopped paying. There was only panic that the ATM had malfunctioned. They weren't hurt that I had withdrawn my love. They were terrified that I had withdrawn my capital. Zachary's text was the most telling. That house is my future. He didn't see a home. He saw an asset. He saw a nest egg he hadn't earned, and he was furious that the interest payments had stopped. I didn't feel guilty. For the first time in my life, their panic didn't trigger my fixer instinct. It triggered my resolve. They were showing me exactly who they were. They were insolvent, emotionally and financially, and they were furious that I was no longer willing to cover the deficit. I didn't reply to the threats. I didn't block them either. I simply turned my phone face down and walked into my home office. If my family wanted to make this a business transaction, I would treat it like one. And the first rule of any hostile takeover is due diligence. I knew my parents were bad with money. That was the narrative I had been sold for 4 years. But looking at the panic in their texts, The desperation seemed disproportionate. A missed payment triggers a late fee, not a meltdown. Unless the margins were much thinner than they claimed. I opened my laptop and navigated to the county clerk's online portal. Public records don't lie. They don't gaslight you. They just state facts. I typed in 42 Evergreen Terrace and hit search. The history populated instantly. I scrolled past the original deed from 20 years ago. I scrolled past the refinancing from 2018 that I knew about the one I had essentially been paying off. And then my cursor stopped. There, at the top of the list, was a document dated 14 months ago. Instrument type, deed of trust. Grantor, Timothy and Monica Miller. Amount, $450,000. I stared at the number. It didn't make sense. The house was worth $480,000 on a good day. If they had taken out a loan for $450,000, that meant they had stripped almost every cent of equity out of the property. They had done a cash-out refinance. I did the math in my head. 14 months ago. That was right around the time Zachary's tech startup had quietly dissolved, and he had suddenly stopped asking me for small loans to cover his investors. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They hadn't just disinherited me, they had cannibalized the inheritance before they even gave it away. They had drained the house of its value to pay off Zachary's debts, likely gambling losses or business liabilities, and then they had left him the empty shell. And me? I was the sucker paying the premium on a hollow asset. I wasn't paying for their retirement. I wasn't securing a legacy. For the last year, my $1,500 a month hadn't been building equity. It had been servicing the interest on a bailout I wasn't even told about. They had used my money to hide the evidence of their favoritism. They needed me to keep paying the mortgage, not because they were poor, but because the house was underwater and they couldn't afford the monthly cost of their own enabling. The inheritance Zachary had fought so hard for, the one he had smirked about in the lawyer's office, was worthless. It was a debt trap. He didn't own a home. He owned a liability. I felt a cold, sharp laugh bubble up in my throat. It wasn't hysteria. It was the laugh of someone who finally sees the full picture. They thought they had played me. They thought they had successfully extracted my resources while giving the prize to the golden child. But they had handed the golden child a grenade, and by cutting me off, I had just pulled the pin. I clicked print. The printer whirred to life, spitting out the deed of trust. I added it to the stack of papers on my desk, the bank statements, the transfer receipts, the will. I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I was the prosecutor, and I had just found the smoking gun. The banging on my door started at 7 a.m. On Saturday, it wasn't a polite knock. It was the frantic, entitled pounding of people who believe they are owed an explanation. I didn't rush. I finished my coffee. I put on my slippers. I checked the peephole. Monica and Zachary stood in the hallway. My mother was wringing her hands, her face pale and pinched. Zachary looked furious, pacing the small landing like a caged animal. He was wearing the vintage Omega watch Dad's watch, the one I hadn't even asked for. Seeing it on his wrist made my stomach turn, not with jealousy, but with disgust. It was a costume piece on a man playing a role he couldn't afford. I didn't open the door fully. I unlocked the deadbolt but kept the security chain engaged, creating a 3-inch gap. It was a physical boundary to match the emotional one I had built. "Caitlin!" Monica gasped when she saw my face. "Thank God. Let us in. We need to talk." The bank sent a notice. "They're threatening to accelerate the loan." "I know," I said. My voice was calm, almost bored. "That happens when you miss a payment." "Open the door!" Zachary snapped, pushing his face into the gap. "Stop playing games. You're putting Mom and Dad on the street." "No," I said. "I'm not." "We're family," Monica wailed, playing her favorite card. "Family helps each other. You can't just abandon us because your feelings are hurt about the will." "This isn't about the will, Mom," I said. "It's about the math." I reached for the folder I had prepared on the entryway table. I slid 2 pieces of paper through the gap in the door. Monica grabbed them. The first was a spreadsheet. "That is a breakdown of every dollar I have sent you in the last 4 years," I said. $52,800. That is more than a down payment on a house in this zip code. I have bought my way out of any obligation to this family. She stared at the numbers, her mouth opening and closing wordlessly. "And the second page," I continued, looking directly at Zachary, "is for you." Zachary looked at the document. It was the printout from the county clerk, the deed of trust, the evidence of the $450,000 refinance. "I know about the cash out," I said. "I know the house is underwater. I know you stripped the equity to pay off Zachary's gambling debts. The color drained from Zachary's face. He looked at Monica, then back at me, his eyes wide with genuine fear. He realized the game was up. I wasn't the clueless sister anymore. I was the one who knew where the bodies were buried. You didn't give him a house, Mom, I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a knife. You gave him a debt. You gave him a hollow shell with a monthly payment he can't afford, and I am done paying the interest on his mistakes. Caitlin, please, Monica whispered, the fight draining out of her. We didn't know what else to do. He was in trouble. He's always in trouble, I said, and you're always bailing him out. But you're not using my life to do it anymore. If you don't pay, Zachary said, his voice trembling, they'll foreclose. I'll lose everything. Then sell the watch, I said, nodding at his wrist. It should cover a few months of rent. I didn't wait for a response. I closed the door. I slid the deadbolt home. The click was loud and final. I stood there for a moment, listening. I heard Monica sobbing. I heard Zachary swearing. And then, finally, I heard their footsteps retreating down the hall. I walked back into my living room. The morning sun was streaming through the high windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It was quiet. It was peaceful. It was mine. The foreclosure happened 3 months later. I didn't watch it. I didn't drive by the house to see the for sale sign on the lawn or the moving truck backed into the driveway. I heard about it from a cousin who told me Zachary was furious, blaming the bank, the economy, and me for ruining his life. My parents moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment near the airport. It's noisy, and they complain about the thin walls, but they pay their own rent. Zachary moved in with his fiancé's parents. From what I hear, that arrangement is already fraying at the edges. Without the safety net of my money and my parents' house, he is finally being forced to confront the reality of his own choices. As for me, I bought a house. Not a forever home with a view of the Rockies, but a sturdy brick bungalow with a garden I can manage myself and a mortgage I can afford without losing sleep. It has a small porch where I drink my coffee in the morning, and from my kitchen window, I can see the foothills if I crane my neck just right. It's not a $1,000,000 view, but it's mine. A week after I closed on the house, a letter arrived from my mother. It was handwritten on stationery I recognized from my childhood. I sat at my new kitchen table, surrounded by boxes, and opened it. Asterisk, asterisk, dear Caitlin, your father and I have had a lot of time to think in this new apartment. It's small, and we've had to sell a lot of things. It made me realize how much we took for granted. I know we hurt you. I know we made mistakes with Zachary. I miss you. I miss our daughter. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive us. Love, Mom. I read it twice. It was an apology, of sorts. It admitted mistakes. It expressed regret. A year ago, this letter would have brought me to my knees. I would have rushed over there, eager to fix things, eager to be the good daughter again. But as I sat in my quiet, sunlit kitchen, I realized something profound. I didn't need the apology anymore. The validation I had been seeking for 34 years wasn't something they could give me. It was something I had to give myself. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I didn't call. I didn't write back. Maybe someday I would. Maybe someday we could have a relationship distant, careful, on my terms, but not today. Today, I had boxes to unpack. I had a garden to plant. I had a life to live that was entirely, beautifully my own. I had resigned from the job of being their savior, and in doing so, I had finally applied for the position of being myself. Have you ever had to resign from your own family to save yourself? Tell me your story in the comments. And if this story resonated, hit like and subscribe.